everyone. It's good to be here with you all. As you know, my name is Jenny Lynn, Jenny Winjoy Lynn to be specific, and I use she, her pronouns. And to start, I have a question for you. Oh, and this is my thesis. What if I told you you had to go to the DMV tomorrow? Nobody's having fun right now, right? Everybody knows about the DMV. Long lines to get in from the outside, long lines to wait once you're inside. And when can you ever find parking in a DMV parking lot? And this is just one example of the many ways people interact with government. Most people, when they interact with government, don't have a pleasant time. A lot of our interactions have undertones of frustration, fear, and confusion. The experience gets even more complicated when you don't fit the quote-unquote happy path of American identity. What if you forgot about a traffic ticket that you couldn't afford to pay, but had to renew a license for your job only to get arrested? Or what if you were a gender-questioning youth applying for your first driver's license, and you would have to select an identity that would basically out yourself to the world? The truth is, our experiences in government are layered by various aspects of who we are and what our situation is. So how would the DMV experience change when designed with more care? And so today I want to talk to you about design power and how designers need to build power literacy, healing, and personal connection into their work today. Because at this point, I feel like it's easy to think that government doesn't care about us. And I won't lie, I feel like this a lot, especially when we hear news about our abortion rights, labor rights, LGBTQIA rights, Black and Indigenous people of color rights. The list could go on. But one thing I've learned in my past 2 years is that government is full of individuals who really do care. I learned that quality services does matter in society when policy fails, and that services can be the point of care to those who are vulnerable so that they don't fall through the cracks. Services has the power to transform an abstract policy into something tangible where people can feel seen, understood, and respected. So how do we get there, and what do we need to overcome? According to the Next 100 article, Disconnected and Skeptical, 1 in 4 young adults don't trust the federal government today, nor do they feel like a full citizen in this country. Quote, people of color and individuals from low-income households bear the brunt of policy choices, but it also matters who's making those choices. And the undeniable truth is that those who make our policy choices are disproportionately white, male, and wealthy. It is clear we need a diversity of voices in order to build a system of trust. And so apart from voting them into office, how do we get more diverse people in the room? And it's actually an interesting time to be a designer in government right now because of the recently released President's Management Agenda known as the PMA. The PMA wants to use human-centered design research methods to create better services for the public, which means that civil servants will be actively seeking multiple community voices to create better products. And honestly, I could see this going 2 ways. The first way, it could go great, and we would get our driver's license as fast and as easy as it takes to get a Jamba Juice. The second way is not so tasty. If we as designers and researchers are not mindful about how we conduct ourselves, we could very possibly be further tokenizing and stigmatizing people and their experiences. If we only research the public, but do not diversify the design teams who are making the decisions, we are not actually making real change. And so that's where this idea of co-design comes in. Can co-design help strengthen our democracy? You see, co-design builds off the human-centered design process in ways that invites people into making decisions together throughout the design timeline. It creates a more engaged dynamic where everybody contributes to making choices. And you may ask how this is different from city town halls or other public engagements, and that's a good question because you're right. Government has been trying to involve public voice in many of their systems today. But co-design seeks to share power starting from the beginning strategy phases rather than at the end. And designers today have a unique opportunity to choose processes that allow these voices to be incorporated with power. This is an especially important question when contentions may be high and social change is being demanded from the people in powerful positions. It's not an easy task, and so I want to know if there is a way forward. What are we doing? And so in true designer fashion, I turn a can we question into a how might we question. So how might we use co-design to create a stronger democracy? Now, I know this is a huge question that won't be answered in a single thesis, but today I'll lead you through 3 different experiments during my time here at DSI. The first is building a collective framework where I worked with NYC Service Design Studio to look at what co-design means and looks like to their team. The second is in personal practice, where I investigate how designers can understand their own power and privilege in a community space. And the last is in healing experiments, where I invite the possibilities for art therapy to make a healing impact. So first, we have the collective framework. My main partner for my thesis was NYC Service Design Studio, who sits under the Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity. The Mayor's Office focuses on helping the city apply evidence and innovation to reduce poverty and increase equity. Service Design Studio's approach begins by trying to understand the needs of the people who use and oversee public services and designing the services to meet those needs. Service Design Studio has a wide variety of offerings free and accessible to New York City agencies, both in building capacity and doing the work. Many NYC agencies, such as the New York Department of Education or Administration for Child Services, just to name a few, partner with the studio to improve their current programmatic and operational design. As part of building capacity, the studio is hoping to enrich their current tools and tactics to include community-centered design this year, which is a public resource for anyone interested in co-design in government spaces. They're also doing community work now by piloting innovative co-design practices through their Design by Community Fellowship, which provides community-based organizations and leaders with financial and design support from the design team. What was special about this year was that their team had grown and they onboarded 5 new people to create a total of 7. And as a whole new team with various backgrounds, it felt important to slow down and create a collective definition around what community-centered meant. To do this, I worked with the team to build a workshop series from January to April. 3 of the workshops were facilitated by Abigail, a new team member who helped build a lot of the internal vision and alignment, and the other 2 were facilitated by myself, looking at collective framing and ideating for community-centered design. And what was great about these workshops was that it allowed conversations that pulled from their own long history and experiences of working with communities to create a collective vision together. Additions into the tools and tactics resource looked like learning from advocacy organizations, understanding how to meet community where they're at, and building caring conversation conventions. The series of workshops helped build momentum towards their new tools and tactics website launch, which includes many of these frameworks, and they're currently working on the changes. So get ready for their launch this year, and stay tuned. The second part of my project focuses on personal practice. I'm inspired by this quote from the book, "The Relationship is the Project," which states, "The ability to identify and address inequities within a whole person framework is what defines intersectional community-engaged practice." In order for co-design to work, we as designers have to be able to understand how the entire person exists in the context of society. And in order to engage community, we have to understand how inequity shows up in our relationships and personal practice with community members. My work is deeply informed by feminist scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, who wrote about intersectionality in the 1990s. Her work understood the different levels of power and privilege, and that we are all many different identities at once. None of us are a single-layered individual. This chart here is a visualization of the different levels of power and privilege in society. For example, I, Jenny Lynn, am a citizen in this country, and as a citizen, I have more privilege and therefore more power than those who are documented or undocumented. This is evident by my ability to move freely across the country without worry of persecution. I wanted to create an exercise that allowed for us as designers to understand how this impacts our relationships who may have different levels of power and privilege. So I created the Centering Community Wheel, which flips the script and puts community at the center instead. The goal here is to outline the different community identities across these categories of education, ability, access to technology, etc., and then map ourselves as a design team in relation. The aim is to uplift community voice and create a conversation piece within the design team to highlight what they know and what they don't know, and how they may find opportunities to bring people in with lived experience and identify inequities that exist today so we can create equity in the relationship. On top of trying this with Service Design Studio, I conducted one workshop with Las Fotos Project, an LA-based nonprofit who builds youth voice through artistic self-expression, community, and career development. I also worked with 6 designers and civil servants to walk through this activity. The feedback for this process was overall extremely positive. Participants thought it was a great reflection exercise that mapped potential directions, saw the opportunity to have a wider team discussion, and help their team think deeper about this topic. One participant even said, "Sometimes you think you're doing the work, but then you realize you're not." With their help, I was able to refine this worksheet to build for different team scenarios, dive deeper into reflection questions, and understand how I could facilitate across knowledge gaps. And for my third experiment, I like to start with this quote by Adrienne Marie Brown. "Almost nothing can happen in a large group without trust. In order for us to co-design together, we have to trust each other. And in order to trust, we have to be able to address the harm, trauma, and conflict we feel either in ourselves, as a team, or in community." And that's why this last experiment is about healing. It's our duty as designers and researchers to create trauma-informed practices that ensure the safety of the community we invite. We also have to be aware of our own traumas and triggers, as they inevitably color the world and how we see it. I was really curious about utilizing art therapy as a healing activity. And the reason is because I found it so compelling, was because of its relationship to design. To make something invisible visible, and working with our hands to surface long-held beliefs and attitudes that we may not have the words for yet. I invited the Art Therapy Project, a nonprofit that provides art therapy to youth and adults, to conduct a workshop with Service Design Studio for a 101 and talk about its potential for co-design, collaboration, and team wellness. I also invited the SVA Art Therapy Program to work with fellow DSI students to investigate how we as designers might benefit from a partnership when working with communities. I believe that art therapy can aid design research because of how it helps to process memories. For example, art therapy activates a different part of the brain that allows people to revisit rather than relive their experiences. In addition, doing something novel while revisiting the experience actually allows your brain to create new neural pathways, which is the essence of healing. Addressing trauma in a healing space allows people to work through their natural fight, flight, or freeze response when they are anxious, so that we can actually allow more room for creativity and presence, as we had seen in Zara's presentation. And all of this adds up to a sense of safety and belonging, which is critical to the success of any group project. 80% of DSI students mentioned that they believed art therapy could help build a trauma-responsive framework, and Service Design Studio is also currently looking at potential opportunities to partner with the Art Therapy Project today, which is a huge win. What I learned through each of these experiments is that who we are in the work matters, how we engage with others and show up matters, and what we do with our privilege matters. Which brings me to my final intervention, yes and, a personal practice in community-centered design. Yes and as a response, a framework, and a practice to address where we are now to where we want to be, to encourage conversations around our privilege and how to move forward, and because I believe all community design is personal practice at work. My final yes and reflection worksheet will be hosted on yesand.design, where I will make this resource available for the public. Because in the end, it's about including design teams and community members more deeply in the process and recognizing our positionality in order to create equity. As it stands now, it's too easily ignored and dismissed. Social justice movements have long held an intersectional lens as a core part of their work, and these elements are missing in government today. And I know this work is important because people are expressing the need for these conversations now. My hope is that we're able to come together and understand how the personal relates to community, how we can turn frustration into trust, harm into healing, and turn today into a better tomorrow. And I believe all of these are ingredients we need for a stronger democracy. Thank you.